Welcome to Module 2.1. In Phase 1, we established our narrative foundations, comparing conflict-driven arcs like The Hero's Journey to curiosity-driven arcs like Kisho Tenketsu. Now we move into Phase 2, Choice Architecture. This is where traditional linear writing transforms into dynamic game design. A novel or film forces the audience to observe decisions made by someone else. A video game hands the wheel to the player and says, "You decide." But here is the brutal truth that every narrative designer learns early. Not all choices are created equal. Before we analyze the three types of player's choice, let's take a moment and listen to game designer Joe Baxter Webb from Indie Game Clinic discuss how to give your characters a voice.
How do characters speak? Let's think about dialogue in games. So when characters speak, how do they speak? And one of the first things I'd encourage you to think about is the overall tone of the game that you're going for and what the dialogue is for, right? So these are kind of three modes that I think games operate in a lot of the time. We've got something like Night in the Woods, where we're going for social realism and naturalism, which is like characters speaking like real people. They've got their own little quirks to how they speak. They've got a sort of kind of in-group language of how the young people speak to each other and stuff like that. They don't speak like characters in an epic quest. I guess the opposite of that in terms of tone, you get this a lot in high fantasy, you get it a lot in dark fantasy and in epic sci-fi, the sort of theatrical melodramatic register where you've got a character who is talking like they are in a sort of Saturday morning kids TV show, right? Very over the top, not at all modeled on how people speak in the real world, more modeled on things like how characters speak in Shakespeare or Star Wars or anything like that. And of course you can go between these, and it's often a source of great comedy to have like a character that is speaking in this theatrical melodramatic mode and then who sort of dips into saying something really normal and down to earth, right? You can jump between these modes, and sometimes that's very effective and very funny to do that. It's worth thinking about these sorts of things of like, does your game have an overall tone where everyone is always speaking like they are in a play? Or is this like a distinction between characters? Like maybe you've got a character that speaks more like they're in Night in the Woods and they're very down to earth, and then you have a character that speaks more like they're in Darkest Dungeon and they're completely over the top. That can be an interesting like distinction between characters as well. The other thing that complicates games specifically is we have this kind of stuff. This is a character that speaks, but they're not really a character. They are a tutorial being. So it introduces this other weird type of language that isn't really narrative. And that's why we need to think about the purpose of the dialogue, because this guy is just here to tell us how to play the game and to give us tips. Like, since I started doing reviews on this channel, I've definitely seen some situations where someone has tried to make the functional informative tutorial text have a bit more of a voice, and it just makes the game confusing because you can't tell when it's being tutorialized. And I think Darkest Dungeon is a good example of this. A lot of the tutorial text and the pop-ups and stuff are not actually written in this guy's voice, right? So you have a very dramatic kind of voice for all the narrative stuff in the game, but when the game is just telling you how to do combat or giving you strategic advice, it is in functional language. It's not in this kind of flowery dramatic language anymore. Another thing to think about is dialogue directionality, I've called it here. So played Moonshire a couple of weeks ago. This is a really good example of one-way dialogue where the player character doesn't speak, right? And we see this loads in old school JRPGs. You go up to characters in the world and the characters have stuff to say. This basically means, and if we think about it in terms of like development practicality, this means you get to write a little bit of dialogue for loads of different characters, and your player character can be a blank slate. And then in Celeste, player character does speak, but the player doesn't impact that in any way. The player character just speaks to characters in the world and we don't have anything to do with that. And then in Mass Effect, we've got two-way dialogue between the player and characters in the world, and the player is actually sort of choosing how that plays out. And again, these are all going to give you a different feel.
In this class, and later in the tutorial section of this lesson, we're going to focus mostly on player choice through multi-directionality. If you give a player choices that feel fake, unfair, or meaningless, they will detach emotionally from your story. To design agency that actually resonates, you need to understand the three fundamental archetypes of choice architecture. First, there is the cosmetic or false choice. Next, there is the blind choice. Lastly, we have the meaningful dilemma. Let's break down how each of these works in practice. First, cosmetic choices. These choices change the flavor, tone, or dialogue of a scene without altering the underlying plot trajectory. Think of picking your character's response style: sarcastic, stoic, or compassionate. The story ends up in the same place, but the player feels ownership over who their character is. Cosmetic choices aren't inherently bad. They are crucial for roleplay, as long as you don't promise plot consequences you can't deliver. Second, blind choices. This happens when you force a player to choose between door A and door B without giving them any prior information, context, or clues. Door A leads to safety, door B leads to instant death. When door B kills them, the player doesn't feel responsible, they feel cheated. Blind choices test luck, not decision making. Let's take a look at a parody of how this is used in games.
Huh, this guy seems pretty interesting. Maybe he's got a quest or some special dialogue or something. I guess I should talk to him.
Oh, hello there, sir. Welcome to our town. I run the orphanage around these parts, and I was wondering if you'd like to make a little donation to help feed the damn rascals.
Hey, here we go. That's why I love RPGs, because you get multiple dialogue options to help roleplay your character. I guess I'm gonna click Tell Me More. I want to hear more about the orphanage.
How about you stop withholding information and tell me more, old man?
Okay. That dialogue option was way more rude than I thought it was gonna be.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I mean no harm, I promise. I'm just trying to help the kids, you see.
Okay, I can't screw this one up. This one is clearly the rude option. So if I select this one, I should be nice to the guy, right?
Oh, I see. So you're using the kids as pawns to rob me blind. Show me where they live.
What? That is not the dialogue option I chose. I just wanted to talk to the guy.
Oh, by the gods, please don't hurt me or the kids. I have nothing to give you, please.
Oh my god, this is ridiculous. Well, at least I can just leave and end the conversation. I guess I'll do that.
Okay, fine. I'll be leaving now.
Well, okay. Our response didn't seem too bad. That seemed pretty normal.
But not before I have those kids' heads!
Finally, we have the gold standard of game narrative, the meaningful dilemma. A choice becomes a true dilemma when it meets three criteria. The first criteria is information. The player understands the context and potential risks before making the call. Next is the trade-offs. Every option has a tangible cost. There's no perfect answer. Lastly is agency and consequence. The player's decision directly alters the state of the world, a character's trust, or a future mechanic. In today's practical lab, we are going to write a multi-choice scene in Twine that combines all three choice types. You'll use Twine variables to track player decisions so the game remembers how the player responded, setting the stage for branching state tracking in future modules.
All right, great. Let's head over to Twine and start the lab version of our course.
All right, so here we are back in Twine, kind of working on our lab. And what we want to do is build a choice matrix. So what we'll do is we'll build a Twine passage structure that incorporates a cosmic choice. It avoids a blind choice by providing context and concludes with a meaningful dilemma using variables. So here with Twine open, what I want you to do is just click the new button to create a new story here. And then I'm just going to select choices here and I'm going to hit create. Let's go into our first passage. I'm just going to rename it and call it size. Hit OK. Now this is essentially our setup, so I'm going to pause the video and just insert my text and then we'll go through it. Okay, so you can see here that we start off with some just basic context. Who you are, you're a scout standing outside of the walls of Oakhaven. So we're setting up sort of the scene. And then it's like, well, what's happening next? Well, a young guard named Leo stands duty at the postern gate. He looks exhausted and terrified. How do you address him? Gently or harsh? So you have these two options. And again, we've talked about these before where we have the link and then we have the direction in which we want to point to, like which node. So let me close this so you can see we have two. So let's go ahead and work on the gate gentle passage. All right, so now we're introducing some new stuff, right? So for example, the very first line here, we have this line where it says set : $attitude to friendly. So what this line of code allows your game to do is remember how the player acted even after they leave the current room.
So instead of writing two completely separate story paths for the rest of the game, you can write one passage that adapts dynamically based on what is stored in the attitude. So examples of how we're going to use it later is in the later passage. What I'll do is I'm going to have it where the player meet the town mayor. We're going to have an if statement, and in that statement it's going to check what the current attitude is, which is kind of cool. So just to be clear, what's happening here is we're setting the word friendly to essentially our attitude variable here. So we're assigning friendly. So if I kind of go over this for a second, you can see we get a little pop-up. This is a story-wide variable after this has been set to a data value. So if you're not sure what something does, you can kind of click on it and it'll bring up the thing. So here's our attitude variable and we're setting it to friendly. And then we just have some Leo exhales sharply, lowering his fear. Thank goodness, it's been hours since the last runner came through. And then ask about entry requirements, gate context, so that we have this other choice coming out here. All right, let's go ahead and go to our gate harsh here and double click that. All right, so same as before, we set our attitude, but this time to intimidated. So Leo flinches, grabbing his spear with trembling hands. You can't just barge in here. So ask about entry requirements, gate context. So let's close that one out. You can see both of these point, let's actually move all of these over, to our gate context here. And if you want to see these in action, you know, we can run the game, but right now both choices lead to the same thing. And I also want to clarify something else. Like, since both gate gentle and gate harsh, they both converge on gate context, what this is really kind of helping us do is this keeps our story from exploding into too many passages while tracking the player's tone. So what we're really doing is just establishing how the player's tone is without having to, you know, we're just trying to, we're doing a little bit of psychology of what our player wants. So let's go into gate context here and work on this guy. Here's the new code I talked about, right? So we have Leo's size, they have a conversation about paying 10 gold or passing through a quarantine cellar. If the attitude is friendly, we run this text here, which is between us, don't take the cellar unless you've got a sturdy shield, Leo whispers. And then else if, which means if this is false, we're going to run this. Now, if you're taking programming classes with me too, you've seen this before, so you're probably starting to see a pattern that it's good to know coding because you'll see it over and over again. But this else if statement here is saying, hey, if this attitude variable is intimidated, then we're going to run this line, which says Leo glares at you silently, offering no extra help. So you look at your coin pouch and you have exactly 10 gold, just enough to buy winter supplies for your family. Do you pay the gold, pay toll, or do you enter the quarantine cellar? So let's close this out. You can see here's our two options here. So we're converging onto two more options here. Right, so let's go ahead and look at what we have for pay toll. So what happens? So we have a gold variable and we have a health variable here. Now if you pay the toll, your gold goes to 0 because you lost all your money, but your health is equal to 100. You hand over your last coins, Leo steps aside and unlatches the heavy iron door. You enter the city safely. If you enter the cellar, your gold is set to 10, your health is to 60. You refuse to pay and push through the damn cellar door. And so, rat droppings from the ceiling, you fight your way through the city streets, but you suffer a severe bite. So this is just a great way to plan out your games. I'm working on a game now, which I'll probably bring up and show you later. But let's go ahead and save this first of all, and then let's test our scene from here and play through it and just take a look at the way our options operate. And then I'm going to show you that diagram I talked earlier about. Alright, so here we are. We have that story that we read before. You are a scout standing outside of the wall. Leo comes over. How do you address him? I'm going to go with harshly. So I click on harshly. Leo flinches, grabbing his spear with trembling hands. You can't just barge in here. Ask about entry requirements. Leo sighs. Look, captain's orders. Nobody enters without paying a 10 grid toll or passing through the quarantine. Pay the 10 gold toll. And there it is. And you can see down here we're updating in real time our gold. And it's showing all of that, so we could see, you know, essentially what's happening in our story. Gold equals 0, number equals 100. You hand over your last coins. Leo steps aside, unlatches heavy iron door. You enter the city safely. So remember, you can and you should always, right after you're done and you're happy with your project, go to view page source and embed this into your website. You know, showing choices, things, especially if you're interested in becoming a narrative designer. Because just overall, you know, you want to show them good stuff. All right, let's jump back over and just take a look at how we would diagram this. So this really is just a very simple diagram. Like, we have a starting point, and really, as long as you understand the context of your story, you can add a lot more to this. But you're giving the person two options. Are you entering the gate gentle, or are you entering it harsh? And then that gate context I talked about. And a lot of times what people do is they'll draw arrows off of this with even more of a description. But it could be really quick like this, right? Where there's the gate context, and then whatever happens, you pay the toll or you enter the cellar. Sometimes you'll even see people enter the variable names below them. But otherwise, this is pretty much a really simple diagram that you can put together. I think that's good for this lesson. In the next lecture, we'll just continue to build on narrative concepts. I hope you're enjoying the class so far.